What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Gabe Yanez and I, we are joined by Nicole Roggow. Now, Nicole, she's been in the fitness space for a super long time. She just relaunched. I'm super excited to talk about this with Honor Your Nutrition. Talk about that. Talk about your Division I basketball days. Talk about the CrossFit Games. I also heard you talk about the Grid League, which is like super like throwback. And then, of course, want to dive into what it's like having 3 kids under 5 officially, and your relationship with your husband. I think I'm looking to have some of those takeaways. So excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. I think a great place to start, at least as far as I'm concerned. I heard you talk about basketball, and I'm deep in the sports world right now with my kids, because they're a little bit older, right? 14 and 11. And in particular, my son is really interested in baseball. And I'm wondering your take, getting introduced to basketball, if I'm not mistaken, around 8, and then playing that consistently throughout the years, and then in a Division I. What do you think about, with your 3 children now, having 2 girls, 1 boy? Is your outlook any different than it was back in the day? Do you think you should be doing a single sport? Do you think you should be doing a ton of sports? When do you think it's great to be starting to do these different type of more competitive league? Like in our case, there's travel ball. I just want to dive into like sports and your take on it with kids.
I love this topic. I could do a whole podcast on this topic, and this is like where my true passion is, to be honest. Like, the exercise stuff is fun, but the sports world that's where my heart is. I started playing basketball at about 8, honestly, just because my friends did. I tried tennis before that, which, if you guys know anything about sports, right, tennis and basketball have very good crossover. The athletes are built similar, whatever. And I was good at tennis. I just hated it because I was the only one out there, and I was an only child already. And I remember like telling my mom, like, it's just so boring. It's just me and the coach, So I started basketball. My best friend's dad coached me, and I had a blast. Those are my best friends. We actually went to school together all the way up through high school. I probably realized about a year in that I was different, just literally from natural ability. I was a little bit taller. I was faster. I understood the game a little bit more. And it kind of just took off from there. I played my first travel season at 9 years old. We went to the Disney Wide World of Sports, played in the championship there. And then I started playing. I'm from Staten Island, New York. I started playing in Brooklyn and Queens, and like was looking for more. Made varsity as a freshman. I was 13 at the time. I'm a late birthday. Played 4 years of varsity, ended up playing for the Liberty Bells out of Queens, which is like Shamiqua Holsclaw, Suburban, all these like big names came through that travel program. And then went to school. I did tear my ACL my junior summer, or right before my junior summer, which is like the recruiting summer when you're a basketball player. I was 16. So in March, so like during playoffs in my junior year, didn't play a junior summer. Still had all these offers, pretty much committed while I was still rehabbing back from my ACL, kind of out of fear, which that is a little regret I have along the way, right? But then, had a great career in college, got my education paid for, had a blast. And when I think about it as a parent, the first thing that comes to mind that you don't realize when you're in it is how much time my parents put in to allow me to do that. And I know you're probably feeling that already, Jason, with,
I'm deep into it.
Yeah. And I almost am like, they tell you that having babies and toddlers are time consuming and hard. Like, I know what we did. I know like the hours that we spent in the car, in hotels, in all of that. I don't know the money, but now as an adult, I pretty much know the money, right? That was spent on that stuff. And I like to think for my parents, it paid off. And I'm really, really grateful for that. But I know how many parents, I don't want to say that it doesn't pay off, because like your kid's joy and your kid's experience and all that is huge. But there's a lot of parents out there that they do all that and they still pay for college, and that is okay. So I think from my perspective, I'm just so grateful that my parents did that with me, allowed me to do that, allowed me to kind of pursue a passion. Now, when we talk about like multiple sports, this is a funny topic for me because I literally played one sport. I played basketball. That was it. And I played softball in high school a little bit, but I think it was my sophomore season. My softball coach, my mom I would go to softball practice after high school, and she would be at the field ready to get me in the car to drive like an hour and a half to basketball practice. And so I was leaving softball practice early. And so at one point the coach was like, hey, you're either doing this or you're not. And I was like, oh, I'm not. I was that good playing basketball. I pretty much knew by my freshman year that I was going to go play in college. And so I kind of specialized really early. The track coach used to come after me. The volleyball coach would come after me. I was in an all-girls school, so it was a smaller school. And I was always just like, no, I'm a basketball player from day one. It's just what I really loved. I did dance early in my life. Like as a little kid, I danced, and I do think that probably helped footwork and stuff. I was like Irish step dancer,
Oh,
so
that's
I think
cool.
that really, I think like footwork.
I've seen that. That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just something my dance school offered, and I ended up liking. Yeah. It was very like rhythmic, kind of like rappy a little bit, so I was like kind of good with it, and I think maybe that helped my footwork. I have pretty good footwork on the basketball court. But I never did gymnastics. I didn't really play soccer. I think I played soccer at 5 years old, and like that was it. I was very much a one trick wonder. And again, it paid off. And, I just read something or heard an interview with Paige Beckers. I still don't know how to say her name. And somebody asked her a similar question, Jason, and she said, like, I think I would encourage kids to do multiple sports longer. And my immediate response to seeing that was, would you be who you are if you did? Is specializing early on, or is playing the same sport over and over and over that you love from when you're little, does that actually get you somewhere, right? And I guess you could make the argument, we see plenty of kids who played 100 sports growing up and they, end up in the same path. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what's better. I think for me, like if one of my kids really loves one sport and doesn't want to go do any other sport, because that's how I was when I was little. If you were like, hey, we're going to go try out for the volleyball team, I'm like, for what? Mm-hmm. But like my husband's, he played college football just at an NAIA school, but he loved like every sport. He still does, right? Like he'll play whatever. He'll go play out whatever. And he played like 3 sports in high school. In the grand scheme of things, he wasn't as good as I was in his sport, right? So like maybe there's a crossover there, but I don't know. I don't know what the right answer to that is. I think it's so kid dependent, so person dependent. Do you have a kind of a feeling having older kids?
Yeah, I mean, I my opinion is that what I'm worried about as a parent is that if they took a similar path, let's just say my son, and he's like, all I want to do is play baseball. And baseball, the commitment level is really, really, really high. And then all of a sudden he gets burnt out. Mm-hmm. Then what? Like if he gets burnt out the freshman year of high school, he hasn't had exposure to other sports. I worry about that. So what I'm trying to do,
my perspective is a little bit different because what AAU or what travel teams were 15, 20 years ago when I was doing it is very different. And I know this is a whole nother conversation. You guys know this too. This is, a well-known thing, but like back when I was playing, there was one premier team in the city. So in all of New York City, there was maybe 2 premier teams, I would say, in all of New York City. You had to make a choice. And then there was some other like lower level teams. Right. So like you could play on like a lower level team, but it was sometimes you made one of those 2 teams or you didn't play travel sports. Where now there's a place for travel sports for every kid of every level. Right.
Yeah.
Nicole, I'm also curious with your now fitness background, like where do you feel that like fitness as we know it, training with weights and that stuff that fits into youth? Because I feel like that's a newer thing that us as parents who've grown up in the space can introduce that to our kids, but like how much of that is actually beneficial versus like just going out there and playing the sports, which I feel is like what our experience was, but now we kind of have this other tool set, but like when you introduce that, do you introduce it? Like, where's kind of your mindset there?
Yeah, I would love to hear Jason's take on this too, especially as a dad and the accomplished athlete he was with having, his kids. My thoughts now on it, I have 2 quick thoughts on it. One is my dad was a football player, Division III football player, but nonetheless knew the importance of it. I was a girl, obviously, so I think sometimes things are different. We're from a very Italian family, so like really traditional, like you don't really tell the girl like go get in the weight room, but my dad was very sports heavy and very like supportive of like, hey, if this is what you want to do, I'm going to help you try and be the best at it. Right. And he always had a little weight set up in the basement, very Rocky style, like what he could find. I was doing like wrist curls for my grip, with like a rope and a plate at like probably 12, right? Because he was like, if you have strong hands, you'd be a strong basketball player. And he was right, He was also an O-lineman, so they're obsessed with their grips and stuff like that, right? Now, when I tore my ACL, he was basically like, you need to get in the weight room. Like, you can either be a skinny kid and continue to get hurt the rest of the time you're doing this, or you can get your legs stronger and get your hips stronger and like, don't be a statistic, basically. Like, don't keep tearing this ACL. Like, let's get strong. And I was like, let's go. Because once I got a little taste of being stronger on that basketball court, again, I was a freshman playing with older kids, right? Like, I was older. And so I was younger. So once I got a little bit of a taste of like, oh, that girl didn't push me around, I could grab that rebound and I was better. Like, it took off from there. But that was really not until I was a teenager. My other thought on the other end of it, like Jason already talked about burnout and kind of like so much is expected of these kids playing sports already. I don't know where and how that fits in, right? Like, I don't know, is that just one more thing you're asking the kid to do to be better at their sport? Like, I don't know. I mean, I used to go to the YMCA. I used to leave high school, get on a city bus, take the city bus to the YMCA where I met all my friends, which were probably out of 8 of them, there were probably 7 guys. And we used to lift and play pickup until literally dinner time. And then I would take the bus home when I knew I needed to be home for dinner. So for me, those things were fun. That was me hanging out with my friends. That wasn't my parents asking me to get in the weight room, right? It was like all combined. So I think that's the perfect storm, but I don't know, man. I mean, it helps. We know it helps, but when is it too much? When are they no longer kids and just specimens almost,
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I think creating the environment is really important. I've seen that with some of the kids that were a little bit older. Chad Nelson, he's with Yeti. He's a good example of that. And Matt Olson's also, these are just our friends. They have older boys than I do. And, with my son, self-defense, jujitsu and fitness have just been like a weekly thing. But because of all the sports, you're right. It's hard to fit it in. And at times it just comes off overbearing. Like, you're playing a tournament and you're still expected to come lift. No, it doesn't. So I think as he gets a little bit older, it'll become like a place where the friends will gather. That's my goal, at least, so that they're doing stuff together and they're basically using the gym as a way to supplement all the other sports they're getting into. I am curious though, on the ACL tear, and then looking at like, so you're at a high level. I imagine at school, you're playing well, you're doing your thing, and then all of a sudden you see yourself playing in college and you tear your ACL. I partially tore my ACL in high school. Similar experience, but not the same because I wasn't getting recruited the same way you were. I'm curious what that was like, and did you have at least? I don't even know if back then they really had these, but like mindset coaches and talking about what type of compartmentalization occurred in high school to overcome that adversity, because you're pretty young.
Yeah, I'm really young. I get really emotional talking about it sometimes because it was so much. And like, sometimes like now as an adult, I almost feel bad that it was that emotionally jarring. I appreciate you even bringing that up, because you think about it and you're like, it was just a knee injury. It was just basketball. Like it was, but at that point it was literally my whole world. And to pour gasoline on the fire, I scored 1,000 points my junior year. I was going into a game, 1,000 points on the season or on my lifetime, not on the season. So I'm about to hit 1,000 point marker for high school. I have 6 points to go. I score that basket. So I score the 6 point. Literally the entire gym's there for me. People came from all over. I was playing, in the middle of Queens for AAU. So all my friends were here. Like, it felt like everyone was there. I was a huge deal at the time. The next basket, I end my junior season with 8 points. The next basket, I go up for a layup, crooked, off balance, land, tear my ACL. So in the same night, I scored 1,000 points and tore my ACL. There was probably 10 or 15 college coaches in the gym, watched me do it. I was like, heartbroken wasn't even the word, right? And I think this is the one event in my life that was like you can either curl up and die and that's going to be your personality, or you can like say, hey, everybody watch what I'm about to do. And that can be your personality. And I didn't know it at the time. But I obviously chose the second one. And I spoke to a lot of older girls that I had seen go through this over and over. When I tore my ACL, I was in the middle of a research project in high school about women tearing their ACL on their periods and the percentage of it. I was in the middle of researching it. I had contacted all these girls that I knew around the city that had been doing it, had done it, got all this data on them. And I don't know, like, I almost feel like, when sometimes when you're too close to something and then you experience it, like, I still am like, what did God make me do? Like, why did he put me in the middle of this and then give this to me, But it ended up being a blessing because I had so many points of contact. I got to see women that had torn their ACL at 14 and were now playing in college or whatever. I had all this positive data. I truly did. And to my surprise, I had all these offers already on the table for college. There was almost no one that said, you tore your ACL, we're out. Like, I was so young, and this is so common in women's sports, that coaches were literally like, cool, let us know when you're back. Keep us updated on your recovery. Like, we're sorry this happened. I had flowers at my house, right? Like, all these things. So that's kind of the mental side.
Why do you think it's so common? But just to kind of go back just a quick minute.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so common, and why did you start doing research on the period? That's interesting to me.
Yeah. So you're anemic, basically. There's low blood supply to your tendons and ligaments when you're on your period. And your ligaments are more lax. So it is my honest opinion that women are built extremely different than men and are not built for sport. That in general, that is my opinion. There's of course outliers, there's athletic women have a similar build, but I truly believe that is the case. And you put those things in the mix, the wider hips, so the QL angle, like our knees kind of angle in a little bit more, already stress on a ligament. Most girls don't have the hamstring quad equality that men do. And again, going back to developing, we don't develop it in female athletes often. So you're asking, I was 16. I had been playing high level sports, jumping, running, cutting at a really high level for years with no hamstring quad training at all. Put that on top of a cycle, women are, like I said, anemic, low blood supply to the tendons. Nutrition isn't really a thing at that point, right? Like, we're not really, 16-year-old girls aren't really focusing on like eating for performance. It's just kind of a recipe for disaster if you think about it. Now, my husband has 3 ACL tears in his collegiate lifetime, right? Like, so the men do it too. I just do think it is a more common thing in females, just kind of because of the anatomy. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, pulling on that thread a little bit deeper, then question on that note, as your girls get older, what are you going to do different to help them alleviate that potential risk?
Yeah.
Is it just all this stuff? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, my husband laughs because I'm already like, don't sit like that. Don't jump like that. Move your, right? Like, because in my mind, it really is training those movement patterns. I mean, how many young girls do we see in the gym where they go to jump and their knees cave in first before they jump, right? So that's fine. Okay, we see that once. Now you put them on the basketball court and they're doing that 50 times a day for 7 days or for 5 days, whatever they're playing. That's significant, torque on the ACL if we think about the anatomy of a joint. So I definitely think it's more important, right? I think proper mechanics is more important now. And I am hopeful for our generation because strength coaches are getting better at the high school and collegiate level. There's a lot more things like CrossFit gyms available where people are learning proper mechanics, learning how to get stronger, right? Home gyms are more of a thing now that they weren't, but I absolutely think it's important. And it blows my mind how far ahead of his time my dad was, truly, in me tearing my ACL and him saying, like, now you got to get in the weight room. You have no choice. And like, what? From an old Italian man, like he knew exactly what he was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
On your dad for a minute, your dad sounds great, right?
Yeah.
My family's half Italian, half Persian. And
okay.
So I've had experience with some people. I could just visualize your dad.
Yeah.
One of my uncles was like this way. But anyways, I have a vision of who your dad is. And I have a vision of how you'd be like, hey, we got to get you stronger. We got like coming from a place of care and love and compassion, but also like, hey, we got to do the work. I'm wondering, you brought up the fact of the commitment of the parents. And there's a ton of commitment when it comes to travel sports, of course. And with your dad, what do you think he emulated really well that, you wish your husband to emulate to your girls and or for Gabe and I to basically pick your brain on?
Yeah. So this one story will tell you everything you need to know. So when I was younger, I was about third grade, and I was pretty much, which I'm already seeing in my 5-year-old, she plays basketball just like in a fun league, and I coach it. And she's just not there, right? Like, she's 5. She'd rather be doing something else. She really could care less that we're about to go play a basketball game or playing a basketball game. And I get frustrated because I'm like, I know she can score every time down the court if she wanted to. But like, sometimes she's just like, can I just sit down and take a break? Like, she's just being 5. And so I can now picture how I was acting in this story because my mom tells me all the time. I was in the 3rd grade. We were driving to the game, and my mom basically said, hey, look, if you have whatever she said, 15, 20 points, whatever, which was pretty normal for me in 3rd grade, right? I'll get you the PlayStation that you want. I've been like begging. I was begging for like a PlayStation 2. And I was like, oh, deal. Okay. So I like went out, whatever she asked me to do. I don't know if it was 5 baskets, whatever. I did it. Right. And I came home. We went right to get the PlayStation. I came home showing my dad, and my dad's like, what is that? And I was like, oh, mom said if I did this, like in my game today, she'd get me a PlayStation. And that was like one of the true clear fights I can remember my parents having. And I felt, maybe I remember it because I felt like I caused it. Like, I felt so bad. But my dad was upset that my mom essentially bribed me to play. Right? Like, he was like, if she wants to go out there and play and do this, it's going to be because she wants to. Like, we cannot bribe her to do this stuff. And I remember that. And I remember feeling bad because I thought I like caused the bribe, which I kind of did, but I will never forget that story. And you asked like what I want my husband to emulate with sports and things like that. And it is truly like, hey, we're doing this. We're doing all of this because you want to. Just check in that you want to do this, right? Like, we're not pushing them into anything because they're good. We're not like, we don't have them out there in the garage training because we think they're going to be good or because we were athletes, right? Like, I felt like I truly loved basketball. We go back to Burnout. I truly never got burnt out because it was always a thing of like, hey, if you want to do this, we support you. If you don't want to do this, you need to talk to us, and I felt that from a really young age. And my dad he's still like that with his grandkids. Like, he's like, she's 5, Nick. Like, you sure she wants to be playing basketball, But I think that's like the quality that a lot of parents miss.
The one thing I want to highlight is that you said like, even if you think they're good at it, I think that's so important because it's so easy.
You talked about that a lot, Jay, with Caden, right?
Dude, it's so easy where you're like, oh, like my son, he's built pretty big.
He's built like your son.
And yeah, and I could just see him like just smashing people in tackle football. Like, I'm literally just running people over. But when I've brought it up to him, it's like, I needed to learn my place. And I think your dad, like, that's such a great example. I want to kind of ask a question on that, though. It's so funny because here you are all these years later, I don't know, 20 years later, whatever it is. And yet you still remember that moment where your parents were fighting. And I think that's just a good thing for me to reflect on, right? I mean, I'd like to think that my wife and I don't get into much confrontation in particular in front of the children. But it is interesting how, I mean, you're telling the story from one lens with your dad and what he embodied. I love it. But also just for us to be mindful that like you also had something that went through your mind as a young kid. Like, hey, did I cause this? And that's important,
Yeah. I almost wonder, like, did it flip a switch where I'm like, man, I'm never going to dog it again. I'm always going to go out there and try hard because like this thing caused this, like, I don't know. Like, I don't have any like trauma maybe I do to unpack there, but like it never negatively affected me. But I always remember like, and he let me keep the PlayStation. Nobody returned it. They let me keep it. Like, the deal was the deal, and I had that thing probably for years. It was a PlayStation 2 I had forever. And I never forgot the story of how I got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to pivot and ask you something, Nicole. So it's always cool to have someone that like really understands what it's like to grow up in New York City. So I grew up in New York City. I went to high school in Manhattan, taking the subway, like you were taking the city bus. Like I feel like it is very unique experience that like is difficult to like, have anyone understand that like hasn't lived it, especially as a kid.
Yep.
And I saw something that you posted the other day because you live in Arkansas now, correct?
Yep.
And you posted and it was like, a lot of people, when they hear that, I forget how you worded it, but it was essentially like a lot of people say that like I live in the middle of nowhere, but that's kind of the point. And I just love that message. And I hope you can dive into that a little bit more, because as someone that like lived in that chaos and now has decided to like settle down and raise a family, we live in Texas. Many people that would come visit, Jason's come visit, would say that it's the middle of nowhere. But it's kind of the point. What led you to that decision, and how confident are you now looking back on it that it's exactly where you guys should be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love that one. So I didn't like handpick this place, right? Like I would say through the years of CrossFit and competing and all these things, I eventually ended up here. Me and my husband, we ended up here. We are in Bentonville, Arkansas. So we're at Walmart HQ. So it is a very like thriving and upbeat. There's new build all over. Like it is a very up and coming area, but it's also the mountain bike capital of the world. So their trails are all over. We're a little bit, we're right near Oklahoma. We just went to Broken Bow, Oklahoma for spring break, which felt like the middle of nowhere also. And when I explain it, it's like I grew up, you're there, like you said, it's really hard to explain this to people that have never experienced it, but like you literally grow up shoulder to shoulder with people, right? There is never a time in your life when you are not like packed in somewhere. It's not packed. You're not pushing people out of the way. You don't have to kind of like fend for your life to like get from point A to point B. That's literally how it feels like living in New York sometimes. And I also, the other side of this coin was like, you work to live in New York. That's how I always felt. I still felt like that even as an adult watching my parents. My dad was a union carpenter. My mom still works for the Federal Reserve Bank. She's on about her last year here before she retires. My dad is retired now, but I mean, they were in the city by 7 a.m. the latest every morning, and they didn't walk in the house until almost 6 o'clock every night. And they did that every single day. I was an only child. They worked their entire lives from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. out in the city to make a living. We were normal people. We didn't have a ton of money. We're not like rich because my mom worked at the Fed, right? Like nothing like that. We were just normal, very normal people in our lives. We always were. And I see my friends that are there still now. They work endlessly just to pay a mortgage, not even to like have a lavish life, just to pay a mortgage, their kids are in daycare all day, every day. Like all of these things that I think being here and having the resources, being fortunate enough to be able to do what I do, to support a family on an income that probably would have us not even being able to own a house in New York City, right? Like the quality of life, I don't feel like I'm working to live here. I have 3 kids. That's very different than what my parents had also, right? Like 1 in 3 kids financially is very, very different. And so I just always feel like being in the middle of nowhere, like if that means that the price of living is lower, if I get to enjoy nature a little bit more, if my kids get to learn, they all can have rode a bike by the time they're 3 because of where we live, like I'll take Arkansas. I'll take the middle of nowhere. I'll take not that many people around. I'll take, there's no direct flight anywhere. Like, cool. If those are the sacrifices I'm making, I feel like it's still a better life for me and my family. And that's kind of what matters to me,
Love that. I saw that post and it resonated with me and like our situation specifically, especially because like whenever we talk to like our neighbors and they ask about like where we're from originally and we're like New York, they're like, what are you doing here? And it's like,
everyone always says that to me. How'd you get here? And then I have to tell this silly exercise story on my end.
I want to ask a question based on what you just spoke about, which is a babysitter. So yes. I could be wrong, but I believe there was a time that because your work, so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You're running a company now. You've been doing nutrition coaching for a while. Have you chosen, how did the process go with you and your husband about, hey, should one of you guys stay home? Should we have a babysitter? What does that whole process look like? Because this is something that we talk about a lot. And I'm wondering what that looked like in your house.
Yeah. So I've always worked from home, even, before kids and stuff like that. And even before kids, my schedule was very much, I would wake up very early. I'm an early bird. I would wake up very early. I always had like client check-ins. That's pretty much the bulk of my work. And so I would check my clients in that already submitted. I would make breakfast, go to the gym for like 2 hours, 3 hours, right? Back when I was like training hard in CrossFit. And then I would break for lunch, do more client work, probably from like, this is now noon to maybe like 4 or 4:30. And then usually I coach some classes at night, or I would go back and do another night session. And then I would wrap it up and work, before bed a little bit. And that was it. That was my day. So already in my day before my kids, I had these huge pockets of time that I didn't work, right? Like it was almost kind of just work as you could, running your business and answering client check-ins. And so when I got pregnant, we also thrown in there, not to like completely off track us, we opened a gym in about 2017. 2019. 2018. Sorry, 2018.
Okay, yeah.
And it was open for a year and a half. We closed it right before COVID, unknowing that COVID was coming. We just had the baby and we're like, this is a lot. So before I had kids, I had a lot of free time, right? I was exercising in my free time, essentially. And so when we had Rain, my first daughter, I knew that I would be able to work around her. And that's essentially what I did. I would get up early before her work, and then me and her would hang out. I would take her to the gym, or, we would play, whatever we would do. And then during her nap time, I would work again. All my kids were great sleepers, fortunately. So I would work for like a 2-3 hour block on her nap time, have her until Brenton got off work. And then if I needed to close up any work on my own after that, I would do that. And honestly, I did that for my son just went to daycare in February. So from September of 2019 till I had Rain until literally February, I've been working around having a kid home. Brenton never had that flexibility in his schedule. He works from home now and has for about the last year, but he still doesn't. He needs to be at his computer pretty much all day while he works. And so I knew it was on me. And Brenton was always kind of like, if you feel like you can't handle it and the kids need more time in daycare, or you need less work, like, please be vocal about that, And I had made adjustments along the way, when a new kid came or whatever. But fortunately, my job is able to be done on my schedule, around my kids' time. And I've done that. Now we've put every kid in, my kids are 22 months apart. So we've put every kid into daycare like 2 months before the next baby comes. So like at 20 months, my first daughter went to daycare. And then when she was 22 months old, I had her sister, and we've held that pattern. I find like once the kids are around 2, the socialization is really great and important. And so I start them 3 days a week, and then they go to 5. So now both of my girls are in 5 days a week, and my son is in 3 days a week. Yeah.
Kids are the ultimate. They make you really efficient with your time. You realize
so efficient.
How much time you're wasting and how much time you had before. It's so funny.
I think I realized how much time I was exercising before kids.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Uselessly. Like, because I wasn't I was fit then, but like I'm fit now. And
that's the biggest.
Jason, I know you've probably been through this for the last 10 years, right? Like,
yeah. Well, it's really interesting too. I'm curious with the postpartum thing. So I know you're working a lot with nutrition with women in particular, right? Post having a baby. And I don't know, how do you have any clients that have suffered from like postpartum depression?
Yeah, I have a lot. I don't want to say easier. It's more manageable for me when I'm not early postpartum to really help them and deal with them and like coach them. It was really difficult for me during my postpartum stints when I would have a client like that, simply because I was fortunate enough to not have had that happen at any point with all 3 of my postpartum experiences. But watching women go through that is one of the hardest things. You can only do so much, in my perspective. And honestly, they tend to disappear through the worst of it. Like they're not really doing their nutrition check-ins. They're not, doing their exercise program. And a lot of times I don't hear from them. They'll come back 2 months later. Sorry, I was gone for 2 months. Like, this is what I was really going through, Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've had great postpartum experiences 3 times over, and I can't imagine being at a point where like you resent the baby, you're thinking about harming yourself, like all these horror stories that you hear, because it's literally, it's like a hormonal imbalance that you don't have much control over. You don't, you know? The worst that I would say I have gone through is I've had like really acute instances of like postpartum anxiety at certain points. And this is very common. Almost every woman probably has a story like this. But after my second, I was almost petrified to go out alone in public with the 2 kids. Now, mind you, they're like newborn and 22 months. So it's not like they're like running around really, right? I was like completely convinced that if I went out alone with both of them, somebody was going to steal one of the girls from me or both. Like I thought somebody was just going to snatch them up and run away. And there was no way I could save both of them. That was like my big fear. After my first one, my big fear was that she was in a room upstairs from us. And the thing that would keep me up at night was I was convinced somebody was going to break into her room, like through her window and steal her. And I would never know in the middle of the night. Like, just, we're talking about that later on, or you guys listening to this, you're probably like my husband would be like, babe, that's not going to happen. Like, no one's going to break through the window, you know, but he would go up and he would lock the window for me and he would like, okay, I checked it again. But when you're in it, there's nothing anybody can tell you that makes it seem like that's not going to happen. And I can't imagine that, you know, times 100. Yeah.
The reason why I ask about the postpartum is that, you know, for guys who are about to have, you know, their wives are about to have a baby, I just think they need to be aware of it. You know, before we had our first daughter, like I didn't even know it even existed. I didn't even know what it was.
I know.
And so when some of that kind of stuff occurs, you don't even have a frame of reference. You can't even understand the perspective. And I think that just being educated, hey, this is potentially something that could happen, I think is important.
Yeah.
Or even like what you just spoke about with this acute,
anxiety.
Anxiety. Like, okay, well, like let's at least be aware of that so we can have a conversation about it. Because otherwise, it's just like you don't get it. So no, I appreciate you bringing those things up.
Yeah, I will say that's just my personality, and Brenton knows that. Like my husband knows that, but I'm very vocal about like what I want, what I like, what I need, like what is helpful, things like that, right? So I know we had our daughter in September, my first daughter, and my husband loves to golf. So like from September to like early November, that's like prime golf time, you know, it's like just cool enough out here. It's like getting nice. And it was only one kid. She was a great baby. And so he would just go, like, he would just be like, hey, I'm just going to go golf. And I'd be like, okay, cool. And he would leave, and golfing's 4 hours. You hang out with the guys and get lunch after. It's another hour and a half. He'd be gone on a Saturday for like 5.5 hours. And like, I could do anything I wanted with the baby, right? Like I could bring her anywhere. She was easy, whatever. But like, I was so freaking lonely. And like this new life was like hard, right? Like I was used to being an athlete, having control of my body, like knowing where my friends were. I would go to the gym and hang out for hours, things like that. Like I remember at one point being like, hey, I don't mind if you go golf, but like it cannot be every weekend, because I'm starting to like really resent you going to golf, because like I'm just here with this baby, you know, like that wasn't my life 3 months ago, like last month, you know. And I think that's the switch that like it doesn't always flip for the guy, because my husband was like, his response was like, I didn't know that you were okay. The baby was okay. I thought we were okay, you know, because like the guy's life doesn't change as much as the girl's does through pregnancy, through postpartum, through, right? Like it changes, your routines change and things like that, but your body's still your body. You feel the same way. You don't have this little baby like hanging from you 24/7 like a mom usually does. And I think it took my husband like a few months to be like, oh, okay, like I need to start thinking about actually what she's going through, not just like, oh, she's okay, the baby's okay, we're all doing good, you know? But yeah, I think that is a big way that partners can be supportive, you know, of their wives, is just thinking about it a little bit. Yeah.
I think a hard part there, because you mentioned like it's very much your personality type, but I think that there's also just, we've talked about this on the podcast before, like a real onus on the dad to check in consistently, because I know for my wife specifically, and it's something that we've talked about, like she's always like, I'm good, I'm fine. it's all good. Right.
That's how I
am. And it really takes a little bit.
Brain always goes, but are you really?
Yeah.
Are you really good?
And it takes some prying. It takes some really no, babe, but are you? Right. And also the conversation I've had in the past too is for example, what Ariel needed after baby 1 from me was very different than what she needed after baby 2. And those are all things that we had to check in and have conversations about, because things change and you can't assume that it's well, I did all these things after baby 1 and that worked really well. Now these things are different. On that note, I had a question about, sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, I was going to say, I think as a wife, as a mom, I that it was all new for us. And so I was learning, baby's learning, but dad's learning too, and I think part of me learned to give him a little more grace along the way. Cause he didn't know, he doesn't have a handbook for this, kind of like what Jason was saying. I didn't even know this was a thing, He doesn't I had a friend that got really severe postpartum OCD where she didn't even have another kid for 4 or 5 years. I mean, she went full blown, obsessive compulsive disorder from postpartum. Imagine being married to that, where you're all of a sudden, what is my wife doing? But I mean, they used to put women in mental institutions years ago, right? After they had kids, because they were literally what is going on? They didn't know anything about it, But yeah, I think you guys are men are learning just as much as we are about the process. And so just wanting to learn, being open to learning and knowing what can happen can really help. Yeah.
Nicole, going into your bread and butter a little bit, being nutrition, what role, if any, in your experience, does nutrition postpartum play in all of this? And then how does, I'm really curious your take on this, because I feel like this is one of the super polarizing subjects in our space. How much of it is this rush to quote unquote bounce back, specifically for a lot of moms that are in this fitness space that, have taken pride in not just performance, but how they look? How much does that play into it versus, just giving your body time, or also just accepting that once you're a mom, everything's going to be different? And how have you experienced that with the women you work with?
I love this question. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. The questions have been top of the line. So first, the nutrition thing. As a nutrition coach, I like to believe that we can control a lot with nutrition across the board. However, as a nutrition coach that has had 3 really positive postpartums, I don't like to stand on the pedestal and say it was because my nutrition was great. Because I also know there's a lot of moms out there who their nutrition was great and they don't have that experience. And I don't like to sound elitist in that regard. I don't like to sound like I'm telling another mom she did it wrong. Do I think it will help? Of course. Is it really, really hard to make positive nutritional choices when you're in the middle of depression? Yeah. Okay. So there's also that, right? And I think this is again where maybe a spouse comes in and is hey, let me handle the food. Let me feed you. Let me make sure you're eating, because I do think that all plays into it. Even something I get asked about the placenta, right? Eating the placenta. I don't know if you guys are but there's women that they ask you, there's these services where you can basically, when your placenta comes out, you can have it put on ice and they ship it off to a place that either makes it into little gelatin cubes or makes it into pills. And there's a, handful of women that are out there saying this prevented me from having postpartum depression, or this healed my postpartum depression, or whatever. And there's another camp of women that say, no, this causes postpartum depression. This caused my postpartum depression. I have never taken my placenta. I do not recommend it to people. I am in the camp that thinks it causes it. Okay. If you think about what the placenta is, it's a filter for the baby. It filters the bad things. And we know this as a fact now, because women that have COVID in when their baby's in utero, their placenta degrades way faster than women that never had COVID, right? I had COVID at 32 weeks with my son, and I actually went for a placenta check, and it was at 32 weeks. It was almost basically showing signs that it needed to come out, because it basically COVID attacked it, or it stopped COVID from getting to the baby. So the placenta is a filter. We know that. Okay. It is also nutrient rich though, right? Which is what the other side of the argument is. It's filled with nutrients. So if we eat it, we'll get all these good nutrients back in us. But I would never go out there publicly and say over and over, don't eat this, don't eat your placenta. This will cause postpartum depression, whatever. I just think putting that on a mom that may have been through something like that is really unfair because we don't know that. That's me speculating. That's like me saying it's a filter. I wouldn't eat it. Okay, well, this woman has reasons that she would. Now, do I think positive nutrition ever falls by the wayside? No. Like, I think it will always be helpful, even if mentally it's not really helping. It's going to help you physically, right? It's going to help you be stronger. It's going to help you build muscle. It's going to help you heal better, all of those things. So I am always a fan of positive nutrition for moms. Do I think it prevents, causes, alleviates anything, postpartum depression or anxiety? I don't have really strong opinions on that. And it's more so because I care about humanity and kind of what everybody thinks. You know, I don't want to ever tell a mom she did something wrong. There was another part of that question and I can't remember what it was. Sorry.
Yeah, it was just kind of your opinion on the, you know, how quickly or the expectation to like get back into it, you know, and specifically, I feel like this is, you know, been a little bit more top of mind with a lot of the like really high level CrossFit athletes now, you know, going through having a child, and then, you know, you see them doing some crazy stuff.
She and Annie in particular, wild.
Yeah. And on the one end, it's like,
I'm pretty sure Annie like struggled a little bit after, and I really like Annie's stories because I think the second time around, even she's very like, even Cara Webb a little bit, Saunders now, is very much like, this is how my life has changed. You know, and like, here is what happened after birth. And I loved Annie's comeback, you know, going back to the games, having that really big night, because she opened up about what had kind of happened after that and all she went through and where she was. And then to come back from that, right? Where I think somebody like Tia, almost everything we see from Tia is unrealistic, if we're being honest. She is like an absolute freak. She is a one of one. And to see her even like go through that pregnant, postpartum, come back the way she did, crush what she's doing now, like she's just a one of one. And so I wouldn't even say that it's like the expectation. What I think the problem is the social media exposure. We have never in our life been able to keep such close tabs on every single thing that every single person is doing. Jason, if we think about CrossFit even 10, 12 years ago, like you kind of knew what everybody was doing from a picture maybe, or a blog post that was written, but like you didn't see them training every single day on social media, being able to compare literally every walk of life to people. And I think that's where it gets messy, even for normal people, quote unquote, right? For non-competitive athletes, they see mom A looking like this at 5 weeks or doing this at 5 weeks. And they're like, why aren't I doing that? Or I'm going to go out and try, even though I'm not ready, or things like that. So I blame social media for that stuff. And that if we're talking the workforce and how quickly we're expecting American women to get back to work, normal people, right? I have moms going back 8 weeks, 12 weeks. They're putting their 8-week-old in daycare. Like, right? Like, and now we're saying we don't know why we have a postpartum depression problem. Like, you're asking moms to leave their 8-week-old all day to go work, and we can't figure out a better system than this, right? So those are my kind of thoughts on postpartum and where it gets messy. Yeah.
Once you go through it and you think about, you know, 8 weeks, 6 weeks in some cases.
Like, you don't want to go to the store for groceries without your 8-week-old. There's like a really strong innate like connection that mammals just have to small humans, right? Like to their babies. Like any mammal has that. You don't see an 8-week-old anything really out without their young, right? Like, I mean, even cows, like farm animals, they keep their babies right next to them, right? Like that's
Gabe's got like 40 of them.
Yeah, no, that's kind of like how it rolls, you know? So it's
I do want to ask, just because you've brought up your husband quite a few times. I know he played competitive sports, and he seems like, you know, obviously he's a girl dad and also a boy dad, and you know he's a dad like us, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious with your guys' relationship. You know, what are some kind of cheat codes? And you know, when I think about cheat codes, I think about communication. I think about there's a lot of things, and you know, Gabe and I have talked about the fact that we've both married people that we burn the boats. Like there's no other option. Like we're in this thing for life, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make my relationship successful with my wife. Like that's just my outlook on it. And I know that doesn't always end up that way for some people, and that's fine. But for me, that's my goal, is to be that way. And I'm curious with your husband, when before you guys got married and as you guys are having kids and as life gets stressful with multiple kids, what's kind of like the anchors that you guys have?
Yeah. So Brenton is unique in the fact that he has two older sisters, and his mom is very much like me. She's very outspoken. She's very tell it how it is. She's very point blank. So he was conditioned for that coming into our relationship.
Was she Italian or no?
She's not. No, they're like, I want to say just white. They're just like Midwesterners, right? They're just, she's just tough. My mother-in-law and me and her get along because we have a similar personality, which is funny if, they say like you marry your mother in certain aspects. And I would say like Britton's personality wise, pretty close to that. He also, like I said, has two older sisters. And so I think he always grew up with that, a lot of like feminine energy around, like, okay, I need to know when to walk away. I know you guys are a little bit more emotional, like those kinds of things. When we met, Brenton was newly divorced. He had been married for like almost 2 years, maybe just short of 2 years. They had no kids. It was really just like a married relationship, essentially. And he basically just got to the point where they both just realized it was the wrong decision they had made. He's from a very Christian background. He was very much like, well, this is just the next step. You just get married. You just marry who you're dating. And they kind of just figured out it wasn't working. And when I had met him, he was fresh off that, probably about a year off that. And I had just got out of a long-term relationship with an addict. My college boyfriend was an addict. And I was pretty much sure that I was going to marry him. He was a collegiate athlete. He was a lacrosse player at Hofstra and just tore his ACL a bunch of times, if we want to talk about injuries again, and then got addicted to pain medication. It turned into black tar heroin, and I just saw it spiral literally right in front of my eyes. His family was out on the West Coast. I had taken him to rehab, literally drove him to rehab. He finally went away to rehab, came back, and I end up like finding text messages of him talking to this other girl. We were running a CrossFit gym at the time for somebody else, and it was just kind of like a mess. I just kind of got out of there, right? So I think when we both met, we had both been like, okay, these things don't work, right? Like these are things that fail relationships, that don't work, that like fear-based things, actual poor communication, whatever it was that we had experienced. And so in the early months of Brenton and I, we were in a long distance relationship to start, but it was very much like that communication needs to be there because we know what can happen if it's not. We know what can happen if things get hidden, if we're not actually saying how we feel, if we're not actually saying what we want or don't want and things like that. And I think almost like, what's that, like life from ashes kind of thing. I think that really has helped. And I will say like Brenton and I don't really fight, almost never. Like, I mean, we have little arguments here, little more. It's just like, this is what I'm thinking. Okay, but this is what I'm thinking. But we work incredibly well as a team together, both in my business now, when we ran the gym, in parenting. And I think like communication is at the bottom of it all. I truly think like when me and Brenton are not seeing eye to eye, it's a lack of communication or a lack of expressing what I want or what he wants and assuming the other one's going to pick it up or notice, right? Like instead of just when we're both like, hey, this is what I'm thinking and this is what I'm thinking. Okay, well, like let's meet in the middle, because kind of like you said, Jason, like we're burning the ships in a relationship, right? Like this is what we're doing. And so like, I want to meet you where you're at. You want to meet me where we're at, but like, we don't know where that is if we're not talking about it. So, yeah, that's a little bit about our history and how like, when I was at the point where when I met Brenton, I wanted to see every single red flag because I was scared of doing what I had just done again. I mean, the guy I had been dating was like, if you looked at him, if you hung out with him, he was like what you would think about like the perfect athlete, everything. And I had been through hell. He had never personally treated me bad, but anybody that's ever been close to an addict like that, like it is just absolute hell. And I was petrified, like knowing something like that could happen from a seemingly perfect person, relationship, whatever. I wanted every reason to walk away from Brenton pretty early on. And I just kept getting the opposite. And his story is kind of similar, after being through a divorce. Yeah.
I relate a lot to the addict story. I had a really, really close friend of mine who went through the exact same thing, but he unfortunately passed away and went through the exact same thing.
Jason, and I can't even imagine that call either, because that was for years. I mean, me and Brenton were together, and for years I was so scared that I would get a message or a call from somebody, right? Because that you just know it's coming almost. It's like heartbreaking.
It's a disease.
So
it's terrible. There's so much to unpack there. But I think that, like you said, it opened your eyes and looking for those red flags, right? And help with that communication, which I think in the end, right, has probably done really great things for your relationship now, right? So for that, I guess there's some, I guess, light that came your way from that. But Nicole, I really appreciate your time talking about, relationships and sports. And I think that there's a lot that we could always learn. I think talking to, I love having conversations about relationships, in particular with women as well. We talk to a variety of different men, but it just comes from a different lens. And so hearing it from you, I think, is really powerful.
And I think,
and obviously, go ahead.
Why the communication is so important, because we just did think differently, and my husband's he'll very often say, I don't know, I'm a dude, so I think this way, but can you tell me what are you thinking about this? Or because it's just a different perspective and we can't expect it to be the same. Yeah.
Yep. We can't. And so on that note, I just want to kind of say, thank you very much. Yeah. If people want to find more about in particular, I imagine you service all clients, but in particular, if someone wants to be interested in your nutrition, training, where should they go? Where's the best place to go for all of this?
Yeah, the website is honoryournutritioncoaching.com. On Instagram, it's at honoryournutrition, and we offer nutrition services for anybody, men, women, pregnant, postpartum, performance-based, lifestyle, whatever you're doing. If you just want some help eating better, whether you want to track macros, whether you don't, whether you just want to, what should I focus on with my nutrition? I serve a wide variety. I just want everybody to be better educated on nutrition, because I seriously do think that never goes away, and that's a generational thing that we can pass on to kids, to help our kids be better and to help just the country be better in general, right? Because we're not in a good place with that right now, and I think education is my biggest weapon with it, and so we can go from there. So that's what Honor Your Nutrition is about. That's where the name comes from, even, right? Honoring your nutrition, honoring your body, putting good things in your body. So we're at Honor Your Nutrition on Instagram as well. And then we do have training programs. I have 3 different training programs. My degree is in exercise science. So that's what I went to college for and has always been my first love before the nutrition thing really blew up. So I have 3 different training programs, a few one-offs, but you can check that out on the website also there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the name, Honor Your Nutrition. It makes total sense. All right. Well, hey, Nicole, we greatly appreciate your time. For everybody listening, greatly appreciate you guys. As per usual, if you're listening to Nicole speak, you're that resonates. Share with a friend. Let's keep getting after it.